We are entrusting the day and the endeavor to the Lord. Let's go. Welcome to my channel where I visit many good books but live in the Bible. My name is Sarah Christine, and today I would like to talk about none other than Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I picked this up a couple of months ago at the Vanderbilt University bookstore when I was in Nashville for a conference called Hutchmoot, which was amazing. If you don't know it, you should definitely check it out. And shout out to Tennessee CS and Cheese for letting me sleep on her couch. Anywho, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy caught my eye because even though I had never read or watched it before, I had a vivid memory of all the guys in my 7th grade being obsessed with this and talking gibberish about some guy named Ford Prefect. To give you an idea of what these 7th graders would say, page 27. Hey, you sass that hoopy Ford Prefect? There's a Frood who really knows where his towel is. Sass. To know. Be aware of. Meet. Have sex with. Hoopy. Really together guy. Frood. Really amazingly together guy. You can see why that would appeal to the pubescent male mind. And because, as I have frequently said, I have the sense of humor of a middle school boy, this book made me laugh so hard that I snorted, such as when at one point Ford Prefect is described by a former girlfriend, paramour, as being the best bang since the big one. I kid you not, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kept me smiling and snickering through a 14-hour travel day that included 3 Ubers, 3 trains, 6 hours at the airport while my flight got delayed until it finally got canceled outright, presumably because Zaphod Beeblebrox made off with the airplane. Brief summary of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This book kicks off the day the Earth gets demolished by an alien spaceship to make way for a galactic freeway. Our protagonist is Arthur Dent, a human who minutes before the Earth got zapped was primarily preoccupied with the fact that his house was getting demolished by a bunch of bureaucratic barbarians. But unknown to Arthur, it is his lucky day. Arthur is fortunate enough to be rescued from extinction by his friend Ford Prefect, who, unbeknownst to Arthur, is actually an alien who has been stranded on Earth for 15 years, pretending to be an out-of-work actor, but who is really an intergalactic hitchhiker. Ford saves Arthur by popping them both onto the alien ship that just blasted the Earth to bits, which unfortunately for them is being manned by Vogons, an alien race that looks like, per the film, like bodacious boogers, and they hate hitchhikers, but they love writing ghastly poetry. And I just have to read the start of chapter 7 because as someone who loves poetry but is very aware that some poetry makes you want to stab yourself or the poet in the neck with a protractor, I loved seeing Arthur and Ford get tortured by Vogon verse. Page 64. Vogon poetry is, of course, the 3rd worst in the universe. The 2nd worst is that of the Asgoths of Krea. During a recitation by their poet master, Grunthos the Flatulent, of his poem, Ode to a Small Lump of Green Putty I Found in My Armpit One Midsummer Morning, 4 of his audience died of internal hemorrhaging, and the president of the Mid-Galactic Arts Nobbling Council survived by gnawing one of his own legs off. Grunthos is reported to have been disappointed by the poem's reception and was about to embark on a reading of his 12-book epic entitled My Favorite Bath Time Gurgles when his own major intestine, in a desperate attempt to save life and civilization, leaped straight up through his neck and throttled his brain. The very worst poetry of all perished along with its creator, Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings of Greenbridge, Essex, England, in the destruction of the planet Earth. Prostechnic Vogon Jeltz smiled very slowly. This was done not so much for effect as because he was trying to remember the sequence of muscle movements. He had had a terribly therapeutic yell at his prisoners and was now feeling quite relaxed and ready for a little callousness. The prisoners sat in poetry appreciation chairs, strapped in. Vogon suffered no illusions as to the regard their works were generally held in. Their early attempts at composition had been part of a bludgeoning insistence that they be accepted as a properly evolved and cultured race. But now the only thing that kept them going was sheer bloody-mindedness. The sweat stood out cold on Ford Prefect's brow and slid round the electrodes strapped to his temples. These were attached to a battery of electronic equipment, imagery intensifiers, rhythmic modulators, alliterative residulators, and simile dumpers, all designed to heighten the experience of the poem and make sure that not a single nuance of the poet's thought was lost. Arthur Dent sat and quivered. He had no idea what he was in for, but he knew that he hadn't liked anything that had happened so far and didn't think things were likely to change. The Vogon began to read a fetid little passage of his own devising. "Oh, Freddled Grundbugly," he began. Spasms racked Ford's body. This was worse than even he'd been prepared for. "Thy micturations are to me as plurtled gabble-blotchus on a lurgid bee." "Ah!" went Ford Prefect, wrenching his head back as lumps of pain thumped through it. He could dimly see beside him Arthur lolling and rolling in his seat. He clenched his teeth. "Group, I implore thee," continued the merciless Vogon, "my faunting, turling dromes." His voice was rising to a horrible pitch of impassioned stridency. "And hooptuously drankle me with crinkly bindle wordles, or I will rend thee in the gobberwarts with my blurgle cruncheon. See if I don't." "No!" cried Ford Prefect, and threw one final spasm as the electronic enhancement of the last line caught him full blast across the temples. He went limp. Arthur lolled. "Now, Earthlings," whirred the Vogon. He didn't know that Ford Prefect was in fact from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse and wouldn't have cared if he had. "I present you with a simple choice. Either die in the vacuum of space, or," he paused for melodramatic effect, "tell me how good you thought my poem was." Which will Arthur and Ford choose? Perjury of the deepest kind, or the vacuum chute? You will have to read through Chapter 7 of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to find out the truth. But to tell you the truth, I thought the best parts of the book were in those first 7 chapters, because after that, the story becomes a lot less middle school boy humor and much more absurd. But that said, I cannot tell you the last time I read a book that kept me guessing so much without also getting frustrated. Like, I was getting more and more confused, but I was still amused. But more than that, I was filled with gratitude for the fact that The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fixed in my head a very simple, but I think very true revelation, which is that when the world ends, you should grab 2 things, a book and a friend. And that's what I'm going to talk about today in greater depth. But before I do that, I just have to share this one other brilliant section of text about what an intergalactic hitchhiker must bring with them on, whatever quest, and it is an item that is more versatile and potentially more violent than a Swiss Army knife, but also far more anodyne. Like, TSA would not even bat an eye if you wanted to bring along one of these guys. Page 26. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has a few things to say on the subject of towels. A towel, it says, is about the most massively useful thing an interstellar hitchhiker can have. Partly, it has great practical value. You can wrap it around you for warmth as you bound across the cold moons of Jaglon Beta. You can lie on it on the brilliant marble-sanded beaches of Centragenous V, inhaling the heady scent. That might be Centragenous 5. Inhaling the heady sea vapors. You can sleep under it beneath the stars, which shine so redly on the desert world of Kakrafun. Use it to sail a mini raft down the slow, heavy river Moth. Wet it for use in hand-to-hand combat. Wrap it round your head to ward off noxious fumes or avoid the gaze of the ravenous bug-bladder beast of Traal, a mind-bogglingly stupid animal. It assumes that if you can't see it, it can't see you. Daft as a brush, but very, very ravenous. You can wave your towel in emergencies as a distress signal, and of course, dry yourself off with it if it still seems to be clean enough. More importantly, a towel has immense psychological value. For some reason, if a strag meaning non-hitchhiker, discovers that a hitchhiker has his towel with him, he will automatically assume that he is also in possession of a toothbrush, washcloth, soap, tin of biscuits, flask, compass, map, ball of string, gnat spray, wet weather gear, spacesuit, etc., etc. Furthermore, the strag will then happily lend the hitchhiker any of these or a dozen other items that the hitchhiker might accidentally have lost. What the strag will think is that any man who can hitch the length and breadth of the galaxy, rough it, slum it, struggle against terrible odds, win through, and still know where his towel is clearly a man to be reckoned with. I will be so real. If Bed Bath & Beyond had been smart, they would have put that description of towels on all of their displays. But they did not, which is why they went the way of Michael Scott.
I declare bankruptcy!
Anywho, In addition to a towel, what Ford Prefect makes sure to have on hand in the event of planetary obliteration is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Arthur Dent, i.e. a book and a friend. First, let's talk about the book. Now, it makes total sense that if you're going to be hitchhiking through the galaxy, you would want a guide on how to do that. And after he saves Arthur, Ford wastes no time in introducing him to the wonders of this text. On page 52, Ford handed the book to Arthur. "What is it?" asked Arthur. "The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a sort of electronic book. It tells you everything you need to know about anything. That's its job." Arthur turned it over nervously in his hands. "I like the cover," he said. "Don't panic." That's right here. Don't panic. It's the first helpful or intelligible thing anybody's said to me all day. Arthur didn't even have to flip a page for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to start acting as his galactic sage. However, once the reality of what has happened, that the planet Earth has been demolished and that he, Arthur, is now aboard the alien spaceship that did it, sets in, the guide's advice to not panic quickly falls to the wayside. On page 54, Arthur questions Ford. "Ford," insisted Arthur, "I don't know if this sounds like a silly question, but what am I doing here?" "Well, you know that," said Ford. "I rescued you from the Earth." "And what's happened to the Earth?" "Ah, it's been demolished." "Has it?" said Arthur levelly. "Yes, it just boiled away into space." "Look," said Arthur, "I'm a bit upset about that." Ford frowned to himself and seemed to roll the thought around in his mind. "Yes, I can understand that," he said at last. "Understand that!" shouted Arthur. "Understand that!" Ford sprang up. "Keep looking at the book," he hissed urgently. "What? Don't panic!" "I'm not panicking." "Yes, you are." "All right, so I'm panicking. What else is there to do?" Ford keeps showing Arthur the guide, like, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. But just seeing the words, don't panic, is not enough to settle Arthur's mind. In fact, when he realizes shortly thereafter that McDonald's hamburgers no longer exists, he full-on passes out. His consciousness just cannot take it.
"I would like to buy a hamburger."
I would like to buy a hamburger.
What I got from reading that section of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that being told don't panic is actually pretty useless. Like, the words in and of themselves do not inspire confidence, nor do they offer any amelioration of the panic-inducing circumstances, at least when they're coming from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. However, in the pages of a different text, the words don't panic can have a very different effect. For instance, in John 6, we are given a record of Jesus walking on the water towards his disciples who are straining at the oars of their ship because the winds are raging and the water is rough. And when they see Jesus, this figure, just approaching their ship, they understandably panic. But in verse 20, we are told Jesus approaches the boat and says, "I am. Don't be afraid," i.e., don't panic. And then in verse 21, it says that they were then willing to take him onto the boat. And then immediately their boat was on the shore. Just shoop, went from the sea to the shore. Like that. We see there that in the mouth of Jesus, don't be afraid, i.e., don't panic, was not an empty or an idle phrase designed just to shh, just to quiet or to palliate. It was the logical response to the first thing he said, which was, "I am." That's the name of God that he told Moses in Exodus 3:14 when he spoke from the burning bush. "I am that I am." So when Jesus approaches the boat walking on water and says, "I am," it's like God incarnate is about to get into this boat. You can relax. There is no need to panic. You can have confidence in me and watch as I immediately address the panic-inducing circumstances like, boat to shore. There is no need to panic anymore. And that's just generally true, that when we come to know the Lord, the one who holds the whole universe in his hands, who walks on water and rebukes the wind and waves with a command, we don't need to panic. We don't need to be scared. We don't need to do like Arthur Dent does later and close our eyes in terror. No. In Jesus, we don't have to shut our eyes. It is a common misconception that faith in Christ is blind. It is not. Faith is not about shutting our eyes. It's not about making ourselves blind. It's about fixing our eyes high, even higher than the celestial sky, and saying, when we are tempted to say, like Arthur Dent told Ford, "All right, I'm panicking. What else is there to do?" Instead, we say, like 2 Chronicles 20:12 says, "We know not what to do, but our eyes are on you." That's the better approach, in my opinion, which is why at World's End, I'm going to be grabbing this book instead of this. Additionally, the Bible is more accurate when it comes to Earth diagnostics than the Hitchhiker's Guide, which was proved on page 61 when Arthur is asking Ford why he was on Earth to begin with, and Ford tells him he was kind of a researcher for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Arthur asks, if you're a researcher on this book thing and you are on Earth, you must have been gathering material on it. Well, I was able to extend the original entry a bit, yes. Let me see what it says in this edition then. I've got to see it. Yeah, okay. Ford passed it over again. Arthur grabbed hold of it and tried to stop his hands shaking. He pressed the entry for the relevant page. The screen flashed and swirled and resolved into a page of print. Arthur stared at it. It doesn't have an entry, he burst out. Ford looked over his shoulder. Yes, it does, he said. Down there, see at the bottom of the screen, just above Eccentrica Galumptus, the triple-breasted whore of Eroticon 6. Arthur followed Ford's finger and saw where it was pointing. For a moment, it still didn't register. Then his mind nearly blew up. What? Harmless? Is that all it's got to say? Harmless? One word? Ford shrugged. Well, there are 100 billion stars in the galaxy and only a limited amount of space in the book's microprocessors, he said. And no one knew much about the Earth, of course. Well, for God's sake, I hope you managed to rectify that a bit. Oh, yes. Well, I managed to transmit a new entry off to the editor. He had to trim it a bit, but it's still an improvement. And what does it say now? Asked Arthur. Mostly harmless, admitted Ford with a slightly embarrassed cough. That peeves Arthur off. He is offended on Earth's behalf. But I, on the other hand, when I read it, was like, that's just not accurate. Because if we go to Genesis 1, first chapter of the first book of the Bible, you don't even have to flip a page to get God's account of the world he creates. And we are told, after every new edition, whether that's the light, earth, seas, fruit trees, sun, moon, animals, God said, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. And then when he gets to human beings, he says, it is very good indeed. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says that the world is mostly harmless. The Bible says that the world is very good indeed. Or at least it was before the fall and sin entered in. That's Genesis chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Since that happened, we are told in Romans 8:21-22 that the world is in bondage to decay and is groaning, as in labor pains, for its redemption. Fortunately for us, our Redeemer came, we are told in Colossians 2:14, that he canceled the debt that was against us and opposed to us and has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. And because of that, we can say, like Job 19:25-26 says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will stand upon the earth. And even if my flesh and the whole planet is destroyed in an alien apocalypse, I will see God in my body. The Bible is, in my opinion, superior to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when it comes to not panicking and in terms of accuracy, not to mention the fact that we are told in Proverbs 4:13 that we are to hold on to instruction. Don't let go. Guard it, for it is your life. Yeah, you've heard of life vests? This is a life text, and it is the book I will be grabbing when the world ends. Obviously, Ford Prefect grabbed a different book at World's End, this book, but Ford also grabbed a friend, which I can get on board with. And that friend is Arthur Dent, the man who, as we have already discussed, was ignorant of the impending big zap, and so was more preoccupied with the fact that his house was getting demolished. And on page 29, when Arthur realizes the bulldozers are bulldozing, he's like, my God, they're knocking my house down. What the hell am I doing in the pub, Ford? It hardly makes any difference at this stage, said Ford. Let them have their fun. Fun? Yelped Arthur. Fun? He quickly checked out the window again that they were talking about the same thing. Damn, they're fun, he hooted and ran out of the pub, furiously waving a nearly empty beer glass. He made no friends at all in the pub that lunchtime. Stop, you vandals! You homewreckers, bawled Arthur. You half-crazed Visigoths! Stop, will you? Ford would have to go after him. Turning quickly to the barman, he asked for 4 packets of peanuts. There you are, sir, said the barman, slapping the packets on the bar. 28 pence, if you'd be so kind. Ford was very kind. He gave the barman another 5-pound note and told him to keep the change. Knowing that the world is about to end, Ford Prefect is like, you can keep the change. Money is pretty worthless at this point. I'm gonna go get my friend, which is the correct assessment. The friend is gonna be much more important than the change for that 28 pence. And I think the fact that friendship is much more valuable than money was put beautifully in a poem by Muhammad Ali, where he says, "Friendship is a priceless gift which can't be bought or sold, yet its value is far greater than a mountain made of gold. For gold is cold and lifeless. It cannot see or hear. In times of trouble, it is powerless to cheer. It has no ears to listen, no heart to understand. It cannot offer counsel nor reach out a helping hand. So when you ask God for a gift, be thankful when he sends, not diamonds, pearls, or riches, but the love of real, true friends." Muhammad Ali was totally correct. Real, true friends are worth so much more than any amount of pounds or pence. So Ford Prefect made the right call in saying, keep the change. I need to go save Arthur Dent. However, not too long after saving him, Ford Prefect is like, I kind of regret saving this ignoramus, because Arthur embarrasses him in front of another alien. On page 107, Ford rounded on Arthur with an angry flash in his eyes. Now he felt he was back on home ground. He suddenly began to resent having lumbered himself with this ignorant primitive who knew as much about the affairs of the galaxy as an Ilford-based gnat knew about life and Peking. Ford Prefect is ready to drop Arthur pretty quick, which is not the best sign of friendship, given that we are told in Proverbs 17:17 that a friend loves at all times, even when they're embarrassing you in front of your homeboys. And in 1 Corinthians 13:4-8, that love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not self-seeking, it does not dishonor others, it is not easily angered, and does not keep any record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. By that standard of friendship, of maintaining that degree of love at all times, Ford Prefect doesn't do so hot. But you know who does? Jesus, who we are told in Jeremiah 31:3 has loved us with an everlasting love. That is a love that outlasts the world's end, including an alien apocalypse. Yeah, Jesus' love persists. And we are told in Romans 10:13 that all you need to do is call on the name of the Lord and you will be saved. And when that happens, we are told in Philippians 3:12 that Christ takes hold of us. So it's like not even at the world's end we have to grab him. No, we just call on him and he will grab us. He will take hold of us. There is a wonderful hymn that I love called "He Will Hold Me Fast." And the line that I always come back to is, "I could never keep my hold through life's fearful path, for my love is often cold. He, Jesus, must hold me fast." And he will hold us fast. Personally, my image of yours truly in the event of an apocalypse, alien-induced or otherwise, is that I will have one hand filled with this book, the Word of God, which I will have grabbed. Jesus will have grabbed me, which means I've got a hand free. And at world's end, the onus is on me to stretch out that hand and to tell my friends about Jesus. Otherwise, I will find myself on the wrong end of another poem about friendship written by DJ Higgins. And it goes like this. "My friend, I stand in judgment now and feel that you're to blame somehow. Though we walk together day by day, never did you point the way. You knew the Lord in truth and glory, but never did you tell me the story. My knowledge then was very dim. You could have led me safe to him. Though we lived together here on earth, you never told me of that second birth. And now I stand this day condemned because you failed to mention him. You taught me many things, that's true. I called you friend and trusted you. But now I've learned. Now it's too late. You could have saved me from this fate. We walked by day and talked by night, and yet you showed me not the light. You let me live and love and die. You knew I'd never live on high. So yes, I called you friend in life and trusted you in joy and strife. But here, in coming to this end, I cannot call you now my friend." Now, I cannot drag my friends into heaven at world's end, but before that, and even up until that point, I can open my mouth and stretch out my hand and compel them, saying, "Come and see the friend, the Redeemer, the Savior, who has taken hold of me." Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was edifying, encouraging, and entertaining, and I hope you will continue to join me as I visit many good books, but live in the Bible. Can I get through this without laughing? We're gonna see. Something I found hilarious is that one of the things that Ford Prefect jettisons is Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And this was given to me by a friend. You can't get the full effect, but it is an Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.